And to elaborate...
Yes.
No. To be honest, there are much... What? If I have... Stop laughing at me.
I'm laughing at the situation. I'm laughing at you.
Okay.
Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if it is your first time here. My name is Jess, this is...
James.
And today is going to be episode 1 of a new series that I'm going to be doing on my channel. So if you watched my 2021 reading and channel goals video, then you will be familiar with what this is. But if not, basically I get asked a lot for recommendations from James, particularly fantasy books, because that's what I tend to read the most of, but often just comments or DMs saying, what is James reading, what are you up to as a family, etc, etc. And so this video is a way of combining all the things that we usually get asked. We're going to do it once a month. Originally we considered doing a podcast, but neither of us are massively familiar with podcasts. The equipment that you would need, how you would record, edit and upload them, but we are somewhat familiar with YouTube, so we're just sticking with what we know for now. If it goes really well, then maybe we will look at doing a podcast, but yeah, it's just going to be a bit of us having a chat, talking about what we're reading. Maybe we'll read a book together, who knows, but because this is episode 1, I thought that we would start off with, or we thought that we would start by talking about the type of readers that we are, what we like to read, how we like to read, just to give you a little bit of a flavour of yeah, who we are as people and as readers if you are new to the channel. So do you want to go first?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I like to read fantasy at the moment, and in particular big chunky epic fantasies. A couple of reasons for that, and a few different ways that I got into that in the first place. But in terms of what type of reader I am, I mostly consume my books through Audible. I like listening to audiobooks because I work in Macclesfield, which is about an hour away from where we live. Before COVID, when the traffic was a lot worse, it was sometimes an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes in the car, so I prefer to use that time listening to audiobooks. I find the radio frustrating. I've got Spotify playlists that I've listened to a million times, but I prefer listening to audiobooks, and it's probably the biggest chunk of time that I have in the day where I could actually, you know, put an hour or 2 hours into reading, because I don't really have that opportunity any other time during the week. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks, and I guess one of the biggest reasons I like epic fantasy is because I do think it's scandalous that one Audible credit gets you a 55-hour Brandon Sanderson epic, but the same Audible credit would get you a 7-hour small novel. It's just mad. So I like to get value for money. In terms of other things that I like to read, I like historical fiction, Hornblower and Sharp.
Like military?
Yeah.
More than
what other type is there?
I don't know.
There are no other types worth mentioning.
No, okay.
Regency romance.
We will get to that. We will get to that.
So yeah, historical fiction I enjoy. Not a massive fan of non-fiction. I've listened to a few non-fiction books and I do kind of enjoy them. I like the more scientific ones. I quite enjoy watching nature documentaries and engineering documentaries.
Wow, I thought it would be a while before we kind of had the revelatory part of this, but no, straight out the gate. We laugh because James once sent an audition tape for what's it called, Survivor, with
Bear
the
Grylls.
island with Bear Grylls, and his main thing that he said was, I really love to watch nature documentaries, and it's just been, surprisingly he wasn't successful.
I don't know why.
No.
What more of a specimen could they want?
But since then it's been something of an amusement that he really...
It's amusing for you. I don't know. I think it's perfectly
But
sensible.
no, here we are, just spill your secrets to the internet, James, go on.
I love nature documentaries, engineering documentaries, also the history of science.
Maths.
Professor Jim Al-Khalili did a 3-part history of electricity, which is on iPlayer, which is absolutely fantastic, honestly.
We can circle back to this. I think we're getting a little bit off topic here, but yes, you do like you consume your non-fiction content in a documentary,
Yes.
visual way rather than reading or listening, is what
Yes.
I think you're
But
trying to say.
well, what I'm trying to say is that the type of books, the type of non-fiction books that I've read have kind of been that way inclined. Like I would never really pick up an autobiography or a self-help book. I do quite enjoy technical stuff.
Yeah.
Is the point I'm trying to make.
So in terms of what I like to read, obviously if you're not new to the channel then this will not be a surprise, but we'll pretend for the sake of this video that you are all new. I will read pretty much anything. I read widely. I'm not fussy really about what I read. Probably if I had to pick a favourite, it would be fantasy. Fantasy or like new historical fiction. They are the two genres that I particularly enjoy. Connie Gulden for historical fiction, he is an all-time favourite, and he does military historical fiction quite well, doesn't he? I don't like anything that is scary or gruesome, so I won't read horror. I can cope with a little bit of psychological thriller, and I used to read a lot more of that. I was a huge James Patterson fan when I was younger, but now I wouldn't choose to watch it, I wouldn't choose to listen to it, and I wouldn't choose to read it. But apart from that, and as James pointed out, I have recently branched out into Regency romance, but again we'll talk a little bit more about what we're currently reading in a little bit. But yeah, I tend to read physical books. I'm not very good at listening to them. I have tried, and if I've been going on a long car journey or something, I would try and listen to, but I tend to, interestingly, I am better at listening to non-fiction than I am fiction, and I think it's because I can't, I often will flick back if I'm reading something and I think, oh, let me just go and check that. I like to be able to flick back and reread parts. Also like to be able to flick forwards and especially if I'm concerned about a character and I want to know if they're still alive, I will flick forwards, and you can't do that with audiobooks. But also I don't know if it's to do with like the different ways that our brains work or how you absorb content, but I don't hear it, I don't listen. I'm not a good listener. Confession time. Yeah, I'm not a good listener. I don't absorb the information, and I think I'm a good listener in terms of if you're telling me factual things, I can pick through what you're saying. So in terms of like work and stuff, one of my strengths is that I'm very decisive, isn't it? And that's because I think I can quickly listen to the information that you're giving me, sift through it and come up with a solution. But in terms of fiction, that just doesn't work because you have to listen to the whole, and I'm not very good at that. So yeah, in terms of what I read, I will read pretty much anything, bar real hardcore horror, because my imagination is quite vivid. I don't need any help. Oh, Loki's coming to join us, I think.
So a little while ago, Jess asked if there was any questions. We got a couple through, didn't we?
Yep.
So if there are any questions that you have that you want us to answer, if you are in any way interested in our opinion, which Not sure why you would be, but I'm happy to give it to anyone who asks. Then leave a comment or send Jess a DM, and we will get round to it in future episodes.
But we're going to answer one now.
Yep.
So we'll read it out so we get it right.
Yeah, so question, do you read really fast or have a lot of downtime as you manage to read a lot?
So I think you've already addressed this a little bit in that you have a long commute. So you listen to audiobooks, so that is how you, I guess that's why you read a lot.
Yeah.
You don't read a lot at home.
No.
You're going to
is that a question?
Yes, I was hoping you would elaborate on that.
You just
leave me hanging,
You just literally... So, yes, I do listen to a lot in the car. That is the main way that I consume my book content. If I have time during the week that is purely for relaxing, I would much rather be doing something else than reading a lot of the time.
Can't say that.
Such as playing on the Xbox or randomly scrolling through Facebook or YouTube. I enjoy lots of other different things as well. But if we're talking about the kind of hours that you would be reading, so, you know, when everything else is done at the end of the evening, if I've got an hour, I'd probably rather spend it on the Xbox. I have a book that I can't even remember the name of.
City of Brass.
City of Brass, which is actually quite good, but I'm reading it paper copy in the evenings, and it's taking me a very, very long time. I've probably been reading it for about 3 or 4 months, and I must only be a quarter of the way through. So I imagine what'll happen with that is at some point there'll come a tipping point where I'll get really into the story.
Yes, because that is what you do. You say that you don't read, but when you get really into a book, as in normally a paperback, you will then stay up for hours, like really late into the night in order to finish it.
Just to get through it, to find out
and
what happens.
And then there's nothing that he'd rather be doing. Whereas I'm the complete opposite, so I choose, the reason that I read primarily for enjoyment, but it is the way that I escape from the busyness of life. It's how I decompress, because I am an introvert, so when I have been out at work or if I've been busy, it's how I then switch off and decompress, calm down. Didn't want to say calm down because that makes it sound like I'm some kind of irate toddler, but like, you know, like just chill. But also I carry a book. I'm not a fast reader, but I suppose what I would choose to do is read above other things. But I also, one of my top tips if you want to read more is to take a book with you. I carry a book with me wherever I go, because there are always moments when I've got nothing to do. So prior to COVID, that would have been, I spent a lot of time sitting outside of classes. So Meg had a 2-hour gym class, so I would literally be sitting in a waiting room for 2 hours, music lessons, all that kind of stuff. And I would read, even go so far as to read when I'm in the car wash, because sometimes it can be 10 minutes and you've got nothing to do, so I would read. And yeah, and also I read early in the morning. I give myself 20 minutes in the morning when I'm just waking up with a cup of tea, and I will read, and I read last thing at night as well. So I read a lot throughout the day. Sometimes I will go through periods when I don't want to read, and that's normally down to me not massively enjoying the book that I'm reading. But I literally, that's my choice of, if I've got nothing to do, then I will read, and that is how I think I read so much.
Yeah, I think one of the things we don't do a lot is watch a lot of TV.
No.
Like we mainly watch comedies that can be over and done with in 20 minutes.
Yeah.
But we don't sit down and watch dramas, or we don't sit and watch the TV at all, really, do we? And normally if we've got time in the evening, I'll be on the Xbox and Jess will be on the sofa reading, or in bed reading. So I guess that's where I know a lot of people watch a lot of TV, or they're doing work. They're always talking about stuff that I've got no idea about.
Yeah, It comes down to choice, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not, we read a lot not because we're quick readers, but because that's what we prioritise over other things, like watching TV of an evening, and that comes down to the fact that the way that we relax and unwind is different, isn't it? So, segue nicely into, you've already said that you're reading City of Brass.
Yes.
That's your paper book that you're reading right now. What are you listening to right now? What book are you listening to?
So, I am listening to the very complicated, very epic Rick Riordan series, which is aimed at 10-year-olds.
Middle grade.
Yeah. It is the Trials of Apollo series, and I actually read the 2 Percy Jackson series. Series. Oh yeah, we had that conversation. So the Something of Olympus and the first
Heroes
one.
of Olympus.
Yeah, so the Heroes of Olympus and the first series. I read them in paperbacks 2 or 3 years ago now. And I just really love them. I think they're great fun. And Eli likes them as well. And it's hard to find books that Eli will sit down and read.
Yeah.
So he got the first Apollo book on Audible, and so I just decided to listen to it because it was there, and I'm really enjoying it. I'm on to the 3rd book of the series at the moment. I'm not sure how many he's released. I think this may be the latest one, or there's one more. But yeah, so it's The Burning Maze by Rick Riordan. It's the 3rd book in the Trials of Apollo series about Apollo the god who gets made into a human and comes down to Earth. The last book that I read or listened to before I started on this series was Rhythm of War by Brandon, which was heavy. It was heavy.
Different in pace, I would think.
And intense. So it's good to just have something that's a little bit lighter and a little bit easier to consume. And then, as I said earlier, reading the
City of Brass.
City of Brass by somebody.
I don't know who it's by. I don't know who the author is.
No. And that is...
That's fantasy, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a series. Don't
Is
you
it?
know that? Yes.
No, I didn't know that.
So it must, a cliffhanger, like you said, a tipping point must be coming because there are other books within the series.
So far, it's good. It is good. I've stuck with it. There's been a number of books that I've started in paperback that I've just chucked out the window that I couldn't be bothered with.
Not physically.
No, not physically.
Don't throw shade on us. We don't throw books. No, we do throw books. John, let's not talk. I was going to go into a John Gwynn conversation, but let's save that for another day.
So that is about a young girl who is growing up in Cairo, on the streets of Cairo, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, something like that, who has magical powers and who summons a demon or a jinn accidentally from the world of the jinn, and they go on some kind of adventure.
Right. Okay.
So it is good. It's good, and I'm waiting for the point where where I get overtaken by the story, and the story draws me into the book, and I'm unable to let that book go. So that's what I'm waiting for. So what are you reading at the moment?
Well, why'd you ask me? Obviously, the online world has gone mad for Bridgerton, the new Netflix series. So I finished a book called Beauty of Darkness by Mary E. Pearson, which was the final book in a fantasy trilogy. One of my goals this year was to finish reading the many series that I have started, if I have the books. But I read it and I didn't love it. I'll talk obviously more about it in my wrap-up, but it was problematic from book 1, and those problems just continued into book 3. It didn't actually get better. particularly with the characters. So you read from various different points of view, and they all sounded the same, and it just, to the point where I would read something and I would be confused about who I was reading about, and I'd be like, sure, I thought that person was in this location, because the voices just were all really similar. So when I finished that, I was like, I want something lighter to read. I did start a book called Away with the Penguins, and I read about 30 pages of that. Then I thought, no, do you know what? I'm really interested in the fact that the Bridgerton Netflix series is based on books, and I have never read a Regency romance. I'm not a big romance reader, full stop. It's not necessarily a genre that intrigues me. I like a bit of romance in my books, but I've never thought of myself as someone who would enjoy like a book that's all about that, and especially Regency romance. It's just not. But I was really curious, and because of the way that I am, I thought rather than watch the Netflix series, I want to read the books first. So I'm reading The Duke and I by Julia Quinn, which is book 1 of the Bridgerton family series, and I'm really enjoying it, and I didn't think that I would. I started it yesterday afternoon, and I'm nearly halfway through already. It's extremely readable. It's amusing and entertaining, and I've just had our first steamy scene, and it wasn't too steamy. It was the right, you know, just a little bit of ooh. But yeah, it's hitting the spot in terms of I wanted something light, entertaining, amusing. I have laughed out loud at a number of points.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Knowing that you are a massive character reader,
Yes.
and that the characters and their journeys is one of the things that you love most about books, why is it that you thought you would not like a romance, which is literally all about character development, with, you know, where the kind of setting and the plot maybe take a maybe where the setting and the plot maybe take a little bit of a back step between the relationships between the characters?
Now, I did want to talk about this in another episode.
Oh.
But I'll answer it really briefly, mostly because you get that insta love, insta attraction thing, and it becomes all about sex, and I don't like that. There's no, my experience of reading, I've not read a ton of romance, but in the romance that I have read, and maybe I'm reading the wrong kind, it's like this insta love, and I just don't think that's not realistic to me. Right. I like there to be this kind of slow burning, slow development. So I really love the enemies to lovers trope, because I like the friction and I don't think you get that in romance. And also the kind of romance that I've read before, often the women are just a bit weak, and it's all about the man coming in and saving them, and I don't like that. I just doesn't.
That sounds to me like you've just read the wrong books.
Could be. It could be because that, as I say, with this one, what I'm finding is I really like it, and I like the character development, and I like the fact that there's that little bit of friction between them. So yeah, it might just be that I've historically read the wrong kind, and so I thought, well, I'm not a romance reader, but I'm really enjoying The Duke and I. It's just it's hitting the spot for me. But yeah, we'll talk about it more, I think, in another episode. But I've just read the first book of 2021 that I read was The Lovely War by Julia Berry, which is a romance. It's a romance with a twist. I won't talk too much about it, but the way that she depicts the relationships, and it's funny because there is that insta love. Now, she in the book blames her on Aphrodite, bear with, so you kind of accept the kind of insta connection. And I do think that there are moments in life when you meet someone and you instantly gel with them, and you instantly have that connection with them. I don't know, I'm almost contradicting myself in what I'm saying, but sometimes there's just that insta love thing, and it just doesn't feel right, and I think that's when you haven't got to know your characters properly, and when an author hasn't, they've just told you a character is a certain way, you haven't seen for yourself that a character is a certain way. So then when they meet someone, it's unbelievable, and you're like, well, you know, if you don't believe in a relationship, if you don't believe in your characters, then it's not.
Yeah.
You have to get behind your characters, don't you? Which is all to say that I'm very much enjoying my first foray into Regency romance, and I will go back to Away with the Pen because I did enjoy it, but I was just curious, and I might even now watch the Netflix series. But that is what I'm reading. What I'm hoping to pick up next is my book club book, which is An Enchantment of Ravens, and then I know James is very keen for me to finish a series that I have been reading called The Faithful and the Fallen. The final book in that series is Wrath, but it's about 800 pages. Yeah. So that's kind of I want to read my book club book, and then I will go into this one, and again we'll have finished a series. I guess, is there another Rick Riordan book? Is that your next read?
Yes, if there's another one in that series, I'll download that next. Other than that, I don't know. Normally what I'll do is, if I finish a series and I'm looking for a next one, I'll just go on to Amazon or Goodreads and start looking at recommendations. But I'm thinking about, and I feel guilty, I'm thinking about starting Wheel of Time.
By Robert Jordan.
Yeah, on Audible, because it's such a classic of the genre, and I know it's a lot of Brandon Sanderson fans got into it through Wheel of Time.
Right. Got into Brandon Sanderson's
through
books
Wheel of Time, yeah. And I really want to read them. I've got 7 of the books under the bed, and I just look at the stack like that, and I think that's going to take me years to read. But I know that if I started on Audible, I could probably get through them in a year, maybe even 6 months. I don't know. It doesn't take me long to get through a book. So we'll have to see. We'll come back next month and see what
you've actually managed to read.
Yeah.
And in terms of reading plans, one of the things that I mentioned at the beginning is that we might try and do a budgie read. James bought me a book for Christmas. It is the beautiful copy of The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. You have read some Victoria Schwab before.
Yes.
You've read the Darker Shade of Magic books.
Yes.
I have not. We do own them. It is on my list to read them. But we both thought that this sounded really, really interesting. So this could be a good first budgie read. Probably won't get to it until episode 3-ish, because I think we both have other reading commitments going on at the moment. But yeah, so this is potentially, oh, you can just see Loki's nose poking up there. Yeah, I think this one will be a good first budgie read because we're both very intrigued, and for me it would be my first foray into the writing of Victoria Schwab, which may then push me to read the other one. So yeah, in terms of budgie reads, this is what we're going to go for. And I think that is pretty much it.
Yeah.
Do you want to end with a fantasy recommendation? So that is one of the questions that I get asked an awful lot. If you had to give someone somewhere to start with a fairly straightforward fantasy series, what would you recommend? Briefly, because otherwise this video is going to be really long.
Briefly, so I give this recommendation. I've given this recommendation before on your channel, but I would definitely recommend the V.E. Schwab books. Darker Shade of Magic, I think it is. So they're not epic. They're that.
I don't think epic describes the length of them. But I think they're young adults.
Yeah, I think they're YA. They're probably 500 pages. I don't know. So you're not into the 800 page madness. Maybe even less.
Yeah.
Maybe 300 or 400. But but the concept is really good and it's really well executed. There are different Londons that exist in parallel universe. You've got our London, you've got red London, white London, and I think black London. So the reasons why I would recommend them is because they are just really, they're very readable, and they have a great story, and they have all the classic points that you'd want from a fantasy. Yeah. So there's twists and turns, there's magic. They're quite dark, so they're not the Lord of the Rings kind of classic high fantasy. They're a bit more of the modern kind of grey,
so almost like an urban fantasy type books.
But because you've got the different Londons, which are so distinct, they all have their own characters, so you get that mix of like the more kind of like Victorian age, almost like kind of dirty, grotty streets and poverty, and then you get transported into this parallel universe that's basically completely the opposite.
Right. Okay.
And then there's the girl who has the powers, who doesn't know she has the powers, and but they're just very readable and a really interesting concept. Not too heavy, and yeah, I would really recommend them.
Great. So there you go.
Yeah.
I think we can safely say that we've come to the end of the first episode. Thank you very much for watching, if you made it to the end. Hopefully it won't actually turn out to be too long. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, please leave us a comment. As James said earlier, if you've got any questions that you want us to answer, we're going to do different themed episodes, talk about different things. So keep your eye out for that. But if you've got any questions, then do feel free to ask. If you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you aren't already. As always, thank you very much for taking the time to watch. Hope that you are all keeping well, and we will see you next month. I will probably see you sooner than that, but we will see you next month.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.